there, my name is Megan and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Today I'm going to be recommending different books based on specific reading moods. I have 10 different moods that I'm going to be addressing, and for each mood I'm going to be recommending 2 different books. Now if you're new to my channel, I am mostly a sci-fi and fantasy reader, but I do read other genres as well, and I didn't want to make all the book recommendations just sci-fi fantasy. So for each mood, I'm going to be having one science fiction fantasy recommendation and one that's not. So without further ado, let's jump right in to see if I can match some specific books to your specific reading mood. If you are looking for a book that will make you laugh out loud, something humorous, then I would go with Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton. This is a sci-fi novel, and we are following Mickey. And he is an expendable, meaning that every time he dies, his body can be regenerated using new technology, and all of his memories can be re-downloaded into him. And this is the 7th version of Mickey that we are on. He is on a ship currently with a whole bunch of people that are looking to colonize a planet called, I think it's Niflheim. And when they get there, it's very frozen over and not exactly what they were expecting, but they have to colonize. And Mickey is sent on all of these dangerous missions because it's okay if he dies. But then one day, Mickey returns from a mission where everyone thought he died, only to find that another Mickey has been created, Mickey 8. So that presents a big problem, and one of them has to die. Additionally, we learn on this planet that there is indigenous life that they really weren't expecting and don't know how to handle. And Mickey ends up encountering this new life form and develops this really quirky relationship with it. The reason I would suggest this book is that Mickey is very sarcastic, and every time he finds himself in these horrible, no-win situations, he is overly optimistic while at the same time being cynical. I thought Mickey 7 was a really fun book, and it definitely had me smiling and giggling at times because Mickey's just that type of character, and I do recommend it for a laugh out loud book. Next, we have Anxious People by Fredrik Backman, and I'm going to preface this by saying this is the only Fredrik Backman book that I have ever read, and I absolutely did not like it at all. However, it fits this prompt because the one positive I do remember about this book was how humorous it was, and it actually made me laugh out loud a couple of times, but I personally did not like the story at all. But the premise of this book is that there is this bank robbery, and then all of these people become hostage to this bank robber. And it's kind of odd because they end up finding themselves in an apartment that is for sale, and it's all staged and everything. And I can't remember how they get from the bank to the apartment, but all of them are being held hostage in the apartment. So as the story unfolds, we are learning about each individual character, their struggles, their backstories, their personalities, what made them different. And then there is definitely a twist at the end that is supposed to surprise the reader. But Fredrik Backman absolutely did a great job incorporating humor into this book, especially as we learn more about these characters and the truth of the bank robbery. Next, if you are in the mood for a book that will just give you the chills and make you shiver, I'm going to recommend House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland, which is a YA standalone fantasy. In this book, we are following 3 sisters, and when they are children, all of them go missing for an entire month, and then one day they suddenly reappear, but they can't remember anything about what happened during their disappearance, and all of them returned with these weird otherworldly type abilities. Fast forward, and we're following the main character named Iris. She's a senior in high school, and her older sister Gray once again goes missing, and she leaves behind clues for Iris and her sister Vivi, and they have to track down and figure out what happened to Gray. This essentially leads them to another magical realm, which is dark and corrupted and is the exact place that they were held prisoner when they were children. This book definitely was creepy for several reasons. Number one, it is the topic of children going missing, and when we learn the truth about what happened, it really was a bit disturbing. And then we have the little horror elements that the author throws in. We have a big focus on earthly things like plants and fungus and all of that, which hence the cover. And this is indicative that these girls have brought back some sort of magic from the place where they were taken when they were children. So there's all of these just dark, disturbing elements that actually are physically revolting in a certain way. So I would definitely recommend if you're looking for something to make you shiver. And then we have Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, which is an adult thriller book. We're following a main character, Maggie, who returns home to the house she grew up in, and this house was actually the subject of a book written by her father. He talks about how the house was haunted by spirits. The book details those terrifying experiences. Now that Maggie's an adult, she returns back to this house and she intends to sell it, and she actually has no recollection of any of the events that her father mentioned in this book. But the more she investigates the veracity of her father's claims, she begins to question what actually happened, the events that her father recorded in his book, and whether or not the house might be harboring deep, dark secrets. I really enjoyed Home Before Dark. I enjoy all of Riley Sager's books personally, but I found this one very atmospheric, and I thought that he wrote the potential haunted house very well. And then we also have the question of whether something paranormal is going on or if it is something that is human inflicted. And anytime an author makes me question, okay, is this paranormal or is this real? I really like that kind of questioning and not knowing what's going on. If you're in the mood for a coming of age story, I'm going to recommend Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan, which is the first book in the Ravensmark trilogy. When Valen was a boy, his father abandoned him at the Order of the Raven. This is a religious martial brotherhood. The order trains its members to be elite warriors, and their tactics are very harsh and unforgiving. As Aelin grows up, it's clear that he has a talent for battle. His journey takes him through epic battles, quests, a conflict between kingdoms, and even addressing a darker, more sinister threat that lives outside his country's borders. He has a connection to this ancient magical source known as Bloodsong, and while Valen doesn't completely understand it, he does learn how to incorporate its uses into his life, and it helps him to be basically more successful whenever he is dealt a hard situation. The reason I enjoy Bloodsong as a coming-of-age narrative is that the story is told from Valen's point of view as an old man thinking back on his life from when he was abandoned by his father. We see his growth and struggles, his internal and external conflicts that shaped him to be the man that he is today. The next book is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This is definitely one of my favorite coming-of-age stories of all time, but this follows a group of boys who live in 1960s Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they are known as the Greasers because they come from the poor part of town, and they have a constant conflict with the Socius, who are like the rich kids. We are following Pony Boy Curtis, who lives with his two older brothers because his parents died in a car accident, and we go through his coming-of-age story as he learns more about the social inequality that he is currently experiencing, has to deal with death, sacrifice, family issues, and especially how to move on from grief. This book pulled at my heartstrings so much, and I really felt for Pony Boy when he was going through everything he was going through, and it's definitely a book that I enjoy reading every time I reread it. Now, if you're in the mood for a bucolic setting, somewhere in the countryside with beautiful greenery, then I'm going to recommend The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien because, I mean, the way that the Shire is described with the rolling green hills and the pastures, that is definitely the mental image that I got. And then even though Bilbo doesn't stay in the Shire, even the landscapes that he does travel to, such as Rivendell and the Lonely Mountain, it definitely gives me that beautiful nature type vibes. And then I also have The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. In this book, we are following Mary, and she is sent to live with her uncle because her parents have passed away. Her uncle's house is a very isolated house in the middle of the English moors, so I think of like just dreary, harsh landscape, not a lot of greenery. And we're following her as she has to learn how to embrace her new life, grow as a person, learn how to love, learn how to grieve, and then that is symbolized through the secret garden that she finds, and she brings this garden back to life and has all of these beautiful plants and flowers and trees blooming come spring. So it shows the contrast between not only the physical landscape, but Mary's transformation as well. Whenever I think of The Secret Garden, I just think of nature and springtime, and it can definitely be described as bucolic. Then if you are looking for a book with a little mystery and intrigue, I would go with The Hexologist by Josiah Bancroft. In this world, we're following a husband and wife duo, and they are hexologists, so their magic revolves around drawing hexes, and they are hired kind of like detectives to solve cases. One day, the crown actually reaches out to them. There was a strange letter that got sent to the king, who, by the way, is not doing well mentally. And it basically says that there is an heir, an unrecognized heir, that wants to be recognized. So the crown basically the king's sister, wants the hexologist to figure out if this claim is true. So they decide to take the case. Basically, they don't have a choice. And they start to uncover all of these deep, dark secrets that are related to the crown, the king, the princess, some other aristocrats, and also how all of this might be linked to the magic/technology of this world. I really liked how this was a mystery with magic included in that because I don't read a lot of it. The mystery was compelling enough. I really wanted to know the truth and find out what happened, especially the way that the author laid out the different scenes, and we kind of had to put everything together. And I really like how it opened up for a good continuation of the series. So yes, we did solve the mystery in this book, but it kind of opened up a can of worms that the hexologists are going to have to figure out how to address in subsequent books. Then we have The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. In this book, we're following a travel journalist named Lou, and she gets the opportunity to take the maiden voyage on this new cruise ship, and it's a very small, intimate cruise ship, so she definitely takes advantage of that. One day, she sees a woman in the cabin next to her, and they exchange words. She even lets Lou borrow her mascara, and the next day, the woman seems to have completely vanished, and everyone says that cabin 10 was vacant, that the person that was supposed to be in there didn't come. But Lou knows that she saw someone and interacted with her, and this is a small cruise ship. There's not a very big staff, there's not a very big amount of guests, but Lou really wants to figure out what happened, so she starts to investigate. Not only that, but the night that Lou met this girl, she thinks she hears a body being thrown overboard into the ocean, so she definitely thinks that this girl has been murdered. She now is scared that there is a murderer on the ship, and she is trying to figure out maybe who it is and why they would go after this girl. Ruth Ware is an author that I want to read more of. She's definitely a highly acclaimed thriller author. I did enjoy this. I thought that the mystery was interesting, the reveals were interesting, and there actually is a sequel coming out to this, I think in the summertime this year, which I'll definitely be picking up. If you are in the mood for something nostalgic, I feel like this is definitely a mood that is individual to the person, because what's going to be nostalgic to me might definitely not be nostalgic to you. But I'm going to go with Harry Potter, the whole entire series, because I started reading this series when I was in the 7th grade, and I've reread some of the books since. So every time I read it, it just brings me back to my childhood and the books that helped me get into fantasy and really encourage my love of reading. Another book that I remember reading as a child that brings back feelings of nostalgia is the Nancy Drew series, the yellow books. I remember having a whole bunch of these on my bookshelves when I was young and just loving following Nancy as she is uncovering all of these mysteries. And they were such clean and wholesome mysteries. There was no violence or gore or anything like that, but they were still super fun. So those are two series that are very nostalgic for me. So I encourage you guys to let me know in the comments some books that are nostalgic for you. Then if you are in the mood for something cozy, I'm going to be recommending The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. The protagonist in this book is Keela, and when she was little, her family left the small island where they were living and moved to the big city thinking that it would give them more opportunities. Keela, as an adult, became a librarian, and there is basically like a civil war going on in this country right now. So Keela decides to flee, and she leaves in a boat to go back to the island where she was born, and she steals a bunch of books and brings them with her, and she tries to set up a new life on this small island. And in order to generate an income for herself, she starts a little jam shop out of her house where she makes jam and sells it to the people on the island. But what she's actually doing is going through all of the books that she stole and finding spells that will help the island out. Unfortunately, that is absolutely 100% illegal in this world, and Keela has to hide her abilities from not only the people on the island, but also any potential government official that comes to this island. And we have a love interest, the neighbor, who tries to help Keela, but of course she is very standoffish at first. We'll say this book is definitely a cozy fantasy. There is not a big conflict in this book, and a lot of the book revolves around Keela trying to rebuild her life and to get to know the people on the island and make jam and have tea and all of these cute things. There are also these really cute magical creatures in this world, such as cats with wings and mermaid type beings that you don't really see all the time in regular fantasy. Then I have Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is one of my favorite classic books of all time. We are following four sisters, the March sisters, and we are basically going through all of these three women's different journeys from when they are teenagers up until young adulthood, and we see how their lives are all intertwined. This is definitely a wholesome book. I love the relationship between the three March sisters. I love seeing how the author wrote them so differently, but all of them are compelling, interesting, strong characters with different talents and abilities. And I just love the simplicity of the life and seeing how these characters were able to overcome adversity. Now, if you are looking for a book that includes adventure or misadventure, I would suggest Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This is a futuristic world. We're following a main character named Wade Watts, and in this world, most people exist online on this virtual reality platform called the Oasis. One day, the creator of the Oasis puts out an announcement saying he's going to be holding like a competition where people have to find clues related to mostly 80s pop culture, and the person that finds the clue will essentially become the owner or the facilitator of the Oasis. One day, Wade accidentally stumbles upon the first clue and finds himself embroiled in this competition, and it's way more intense with regards to the other players than he thought it was ever going to be. In order to survive, Wade will have to win, but luckily he's been studying the creator of the Oasis, who's kind of like his idol for a long time. Ready Player One for me was a really fun book. It definitely was unique in its premise, at least with regards to everything that I have ever read. And then I also like how it's very light in its tone, and Wade is a bit sarcastic at times. I really liked the references to 80s pop culture. I felt like the scenes that Ernest Cline wrote related to this virtual reality world were very believable and is something I could see happening in the future. Then we have Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. I can't think of another book that encompasses adventure quite like this. Pretty sure everybody knows what this book is about, but we are following Alice, who falls down a rabbit hole into the Kingdom of Hearts, or Queendom of Hearts. She comes across all of these strange characters, has all of these strange experiences, and eventually finds herself the target of the Queen of Hearts and has to figure out a way to escape. I personally found this to be one of the strangest books that I have ever read. Lewis Carroll is such an Imaginarian, but I feel like if you are someone that wants to be on an adventure, but the adventure just doesn't make any sense and it's almost like being in a dream, Alice in Wonderland is a great book to choose. Then if you are in the mood for a bit of romance in your books, I'm going to choose The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer, the first one being Cinder. These are YA sci-fi books, sci-fi-ish books, and all of them are a different fairy tale retelling. So in Cinder, this is a retelling of Cinderella, so kind of key you into a potential romance here. We are following Cinder, and she is a cyborg who lives in New Beijing, and in this world, there are people who live on the moon known as lunars. Cinder doesn't want to draw attention to herself. She lives with her stepmother and two stepsisters, but when her life becomes entwined with the handsome Prince Kai, she finds herself in the middle of an intergalactic struggle and a forbidden romance. These books are super cute, and every single book follows a different character, but all of the characters are involved in the central plot. I love the little sci-fi elements thrown in. I love the references to the original fairy tales and the unique spin that Marissa Meyer threw on each story, and the romances are really cute and wholesome as well. Then we have Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, which is definitely one of my favorite classics of all time. We are following a family, the Bennets, and there are four daughters, and the oldest daughter is trying to find a husband because this is the early 1800s, and unfortunately a woman's success in society is kind of contingent on who she marries. And then we have Elizabeth Bennet, who isn't really looking for love. She's kind of letting her older sister have her moment, but then she ends up getting involved with Mr. Darcy, who is a friend of her older sister's potential love interest. And there is a lot of confusion at first whether Mr. Darcy actually likes her. He's a bit off-putting and rude, but then what we learn is that Mr. Darcy actually has a very soft heart towards Elizabeth. He has been doing all of these kind things for her, but she unfortunately couldn't see past the end of her nose and her own prejudices towards Darcy himself. And lastly, if you are in the mood for a dark, twisted tale, I'm going to have to go with Dracula by Bram Stoker. This follows the story of Count Dracula, who wants to move from Transylvania to England in order to spread the curse of the undead. And this book is actually written through a series of letters and things like that, which make the reading experience very much different than other types of stories. The main plot revolves around Dracula's attempt to buy an estate in England where he plans to bring people to and turn them into vampires, and he's set to his sight on a woman named Lucy. Dracula's obsession with Lucy leads her best friend Mina and Lucy's fiance into a battle to overthrow Dracula. As Dracula grows more and more powerful, Lucy's friends have to call on the help of Professor Van Helsing. Professor Van Helsing is a professor of the occult and supernatural disturbances, and all of them have to work together to help overthrow Dracula and save Lucy before she's turned into a vampire. While this book is not as graphic as other books, especially books today, it is creepy. And if you kind of think about the deeper message that Bram Stoker was trying to communicate with Dracula's actions with Lucy, it's very, very relative to today. And I just think that this book was definitely before its time and creepy for its time. And then we have House of Salt and Sorrow by Aaron A. Craig. This is a standalone YA dark fantasy and a retelling of The 12 Dancing Princesses. We are following a main character named Annalie who lives on a coastal mansion. And Annalie, if I remember correctly, has 12 sisters or 11 sisters, and slowly these sisters have been dying off one by one. An eerie curse seems to be following this family around, so the atmosphere of this story is very, very bleak, tragic, and grief-stricken. As the novel progresses, Annalie starts to question whether her sisters' deaths were accidents or if there was a more sinister, malevolent force behind how they died and why they died. The reason that I recommend this book is not only do we have a setting that is bleak and dreary, being on this coast with this gray ocean and all of these storms, but there are scenes in this book where Annalie is seeing ghosts and these supernatural apparitions, and the way that Aaron A. Craig describes them just gave me the chills. Oh my gosh, there were moments where I was like, I need to skip past this. She definitely does an awesome job writing horror elements and making things creepy, and I feel like this is a great book to read if you like dark, twisty tales or a book to read around Halloween. Trust me, you won't regret it. Okay, you guys, those are some book recommendations for different reading moods. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them, or if you have any book recommendations that might fit these specific moods. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you soon in another video. Goodbye!